What's known? John Wilborn, what's up, buddy? So, welcome to Unity Motorsports Garage first ever live chat. We're going to talk over some pretty cool things tonight. Um, what's up, Todd? Um, Kind of give you a little bit of background about me and uh, how Unity Motorsports came to be and all that good stuff. Mopar Nut, what's up, buddy? Um, so everybody knows me as Andy Wood. You know, get to know me a little bit better. I'm married, got two kids, two wonderful girls, Ava and Becca. Um, I've been doing this hot rodding thing for quite a while, pretty much my whole life. And we, this has been a journey, but I've been having a lot of slow mode. Hey, Steve, can you change it? Because I don't know how to change it. But, anyways, let's get back to the story. Um, Unity Motorsports Garage. There's a huge story behind it. Years and years ago, back in my street racing days, a group of us used to hang around together at a certain gas station. We used to cruise up and down this Franklin Boulevard here locally to us. And the cool part about it was we all had different types of cars. We had Mustangs, Chevelles, even Hondas. What's up, Joseph? Kurt, good to see you. And so we just always hung around each other, even though it was kind of like our group. We never raced each other unless it was for fun. HG, what's up, buddy? There's one of them from the end of Unity Sports days, HG. But yeah, we would all hang around this gas station. And so a group of us decided to start a car club. And I called that car club Unity Motorsports. And the reason why we called it that was all different makes of cars. We were all friends. I had a Mustang with a 4.6 that I raced. HG came out there with his buddy Kyle in a big block Chevelle that wreaked havoc on everybody. And yeah, we had a lot of good time just hanging out back in the day. My buddy John, he had a Plymouth Scamp with a 340 in it that used to be my motor. And so we started this car club called Unity Motorsports. And of course, like as anything else went on, you get busted for street racing a few times and get in trouble, and people grow up, move on to other things. And so the name kind of just died away. And when I YouTube thing, I was thinking about what would be a cool name for a channel. And I thought about the Unity Motorsports Garage, the Unity Motorsports bringing back a bit of the past. And because, even though I'm a Ford man, I'm a Mopar man at heart. And, it just is what it is. But I'm open to everything because as I've gotten older, I've realized that other brands have a lot of good attributes. And a lot of times you can take plays out of their playbook and apply it to, say, Mopar or Ford, and you'll have really good luck. Because as Ford guys and Chevy guys, we all live in our own little world. You know what I'm saying? So, stupid fast truck, what's up now? Tim from Australia, good to see you. but yeah, that's where the name Unity Motorsports came from. Um, I've been pretty much racing and in the cars pretty much my whole life. And, you know, you, when I was growing up, I pretty much read every magazine I could get my hand on or every book. In fact, my first car was a 70 Plymouth Duster for those of y'all that don't know. And, I rebuilt the engine in that car when I was 14 years old. Had my brother take me up to our local Pet Boys, brother Steve Wood there, and I had some money and I bought a How to Rebuild a Small Block Mopar book, and I bought my first David Vizard book, How to Build Horsepower. And I read those things until the covers about fell off of them. And I continued to collect those books through the years, and especially Vizard's books, and read them from cover to cover. Yeah, that's right. Steve is the bouncer for our travels, John. That's for sure. Um, but yeah, so growing up in the pre-internet days was a huge plus for me because reading books, getting knowledge from firsthand information from people went a long way. It's not like it is today where um, you look at something on the internet and you're wondering if it's actually true or not. Back then, you had to go to the source to find out if it was real. And I'm grateful for that, and actually living that experience. Um, but yeah, so I'm going to get into kind of the David Vizard story because that's very important. Um, Around the early 2000s, I had went to work at Freightliner. I build Freightliner trucks for a living, by the way, y'all. Been there 23 years this year. Um, but I've always built engines on the side and done things for people, hot rods, things of that sort. And I'll never forget going into a speed shop. Yeah, back when they actually had speed shops around here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was sitting there at the counter waiting to be waited on. And this guy sitting beside of me was talking to Tony Brown. The name of the speed shop was Atlantic Speed Shop, by the way. It was ran by Tony Brown. And I was in there and I was just listening to him talk. And I thought, man, I know this guy from somewhere. He looks so familiar. And he had an English accent. And old man in the shop, what's up, y'all? But I was like, man, I know this guy from somewhere. And then when Tony called him David, it rung a bell with me. I knew exactly who it was. So I went over to him and introduced myself to him. And HD, you still have the Herbert's hoodie? That's funny right there now. That's old school. By the way, HD used to work up at Doug Herbert's. Pretty cool stuff. Um, but yeah, I went up and introduced myself to David, told him who I was, and told him what I was working on at the time. I'd just really gotten into the nuts and bolts of the 4.6 liter stuff, modular stuff. And he was really interested in learning more about it at that time. And so we exchanged phone numbers, and I gave him a call because he told me to give him a call that night. And we talked on the phone that night for probably 4 hours. I mean, it was just incredible. And, I was like a sponge listening to this man. And I still am today, even after all of these years. I'm thinking it's coming up on like 15 or 16 years, thereabouts. But What I didn't know was that that was going to become a lifelong friendship, and he was going to be my mentor, if you will. And so I went and started going over to his house and his shop, just hanging out, just listening. And he started asking me questions about this 4.6 stuff that I was in. And he found it pretty fascinating. He was wanting to learn about it because he hadn't been exposed to it that much. And I told him what I had done with what I had, and he was pretty impressed with that at that point. He was like, "That's not too bad. Even though it's still slow, it's still pretty good." I'm thinking, "Well, thanks a lot." But um, so he took me under his wing, and he had a ton of connections, because you got to remember, this man has written over 4,000 magazine articles. He's written nearly probably 40 books, and he is a very brilliant man. He has an IQ of like 160. I mean, that's how smart he is. And for those of you who may not know, he was actually an aeronautical engineer before he got into cars. And the last plane that he worked on or had a part in building was the famous Concorde, which is pretty awesome in my opinion. But anyways, getting back on topic. Epi's Chop Shop, what's up? So we developed this friendship, and he found out through the grapevine that Edelbrock was coming out with a carbureted manifold for the 4.6 liter 2 valve, and he had a connection there, and so they actually sent us like the third manifold that they cast so that we could do some testing with a carburetor on the 4.6. So we were like the first to put a carburetor on a 4.6 liter mod motor 2 valve, and man, that changed everything. And so then we started doing some other things. I started doing a lot of camshaft testing with him, and flow bench testing, learning how to use the flow bench, learning what the results mean of what you get on a flow bench, because you got to be able to interpret those results that you do get and know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, so working under him through these past years has just been a blessing, really. And, you know, um, making it practical, down to earth, uh, workable stuff that makes sense to me, because, a lot of times he's able to talk over my head, but I make it practical. I turn it into myself, because I'm just pretty much low buck, low tech guy that figure out a way to make it work. And so yeah, that's the story on that. And so what do you guys want to talk about tonight? I'm gonna leave it up to y'all a little bit. Yeah, stupid fast truck, his DIY flow bench stuff is really interesting. Um, we've actually made a couple simple flow benches at his shop, just using shop vacs, for his books. Um, Another cool thing most of you may not know, I'm actually in a couple of his books. His porting cylinder head book, and the Holly carburetor book. My Blue Mustang is in that book. The status of Casper, man, God, Casper's been down for a long time. Um, Building this new engine has been time consuming. Outside of work and personal things, that kind of set me back a few months. But, things are going pretty good. And not to mention this whole epidemic, trying to get a camcorder, it's about a 5 week deal, just to try to get a cam or push rods or anything like that. Yeah, what caused the engine to fail? Now this is really crazy. John Wilborn and my brother Steve, they were there and they witnessed it firsthand. But we were cruising along. We just passed the Tennessee border, and we were doing like 50 miles an hour, going downhill, I believe. And all of a sudden, it sounded like the truck jumped time. It sounded like the distributor had come loose, and it jumped about 30 or 40 degrees out of time. And all of a sudden it backfired, and it was like the loudest backfire ever. And then right after that, it sounded like somebody was dumping metal down a garbage disposal. That's when the number 7 connecting rod went out through the oil pan. We tried our best to figure out what it was. We took and pulled the distributor out, and that's when we seen that the roll pin in the distributor again had actually sheared, and the gear had spun on the shaft of the distributor. And yeah, a little 25-cent part costed that engine. You know, I kind of knew that that engine was going to go, but that's not the way you want an engine to go. If you want it to go, you want it to be epic, you know, something making a pass down the track or something maybe. But just cruising down the road trying to get to Uncle Tony's garage, that was it was an adventure. There will be a second point to that. We will make it to Tennessee. Didn't someone make a carb manifold for the 5.4 as well? Yes, they did. Sullivan made an intake for the 5.4 liter 4-valve stuff. They were big into doing 4-valve stuff for the 4.6 and the 5.4. And there was actually some companies out there who manufactured adapter plates to where you could put a 4.6 intake onto a 5.4. So yeah, some pretty cool stuff there. MT Ram 426. Thank you, man. $20. I appreciate that. You know, guys, my channel, I view it like this. I try to give away what was freely given to me. And by sharing my knowledge with you guys, you know, David took me under his wing and showed me pretty much everything that I wanted to learn. And, you know, I would feel bad if I didn't try to share that knowledge in somehow, some way. You know, I've learned a lot through real world trial and error because, you know, like I said, growing up in the pre-internet days, that's what you had. And you put something together and it worked, fine. If it didn't, you go back to the drawing board. Yeah, Joseph, I'm going to be putting mixed up boss is going to be a pretty unique deal. The intake setup for it is still kind of up in the air. And the reason why I say that, my initial plan was to put a Boss 302 intake manifold on that with adapter plates. Then I decided to make the intake. John Wilburn, what's up, buddy? Yeah. Hopefully I don't need any more roll pins. I have nightmares about roll pins. But yeah, the Boss 302 intake was something that I toyed around with, but on this engine, I wanted to be able to have a dry manifold and pretty much go to like a Cleveland style manifold where I could change them on the dyno and not have to worry about coolant and all of that mess. So I'm thinking about adapting a Cleveland manifold, a 9.2 deck Cleveland manifold to the 9.5 deck setup. Okay. No, not the modern Boss 302, the old 302. Yeah, there has been some sheet metal tunnel rams made for the 5.4. Um, so they are out there. Tim, how many miles were on your rockers? I had put nearly 7,200 miles on that engine when it let go. Yeah, and that's an interesting thing too, because that engine had a solid roller cam in it. Uh, it was pretty small for a small solid roller. Um, it was a 245, 253 at 50 thousandths, 674 lift on the intake and exhaust on a 108. And yeah, valve springs with a solid roller on the street, uh, you you have to keep an eye on them. Yeah, the combat wound patch, it did its job, but that motor was just too far gone. We made it what, an extra 100 yards, John? Um, um, you know, Casper's new engine, the Boss, um, mixed up Boss, is going to be pretty awesome. I can't wait to get it on the dyno. The Well, let me give you a little update on that. You're going to see a video coming up pretty soon on short block, but it's been one thing after another. And, when you build a race type engine, you know, I've done plenty of stock type stuff, junkyard stuff. Kurt, man, what's going on? Thank you, man. Appreciate that. The You can take heads off of one block and put on another, and it'll run fine. That's no issue. But when you start building something a little bit more spicy, and you're trying to make some serious power and try to make uh, every horsepower count, you take and you got to mock it up multiple times, take it apart, check your deck height, and double check everything. And so, in one of my videos, when part two, when I was tearing it down, I actually checked the deck height with the pistons that was in the short block from Ford. And even though the decks of the block were square, I mean, they were straight, they wasn't square. So since that wasn't the pistons that I was going to be using in the build, I decided to wait until I got everything balanced, got the rods on the pistons and all that. Then I mocked it up again with the pistons that I was actually going to use, so that I knew that I was getting a good measurement, and pretty much got the same result. So I had to take it apart again, send the block back up to my buddy's machine shop, M&E Engine Services, up in Shelby, North Carolina, and we got the deck straight. And so now it's pretty much just final assembly time. Thank God. It's been a process. Uh, yeah, HD, you know what I'm talking about. When it valve springs do not last on the street with a solid roller. If you decide that you want to go to a solid roller cam, you got to be willing to pay the price tag for admission. And that admission price is valve springs and the upkeep that comes along with it. Because what ends up happening is, with the aggressive ramps on those profiles, it will just eat valve springs up like nobody's business. Lot Burns just completed a Boss 302. Oh yeah, that's a fun revving combination right there. Uh, yeah, for those of you who don't know, growing up, I was the Mopar guy in the family, and my brother Steve was into Pontiacs because when we were growing up, our dad had a '68 Firebird Ram Air car with a 400, and that was supposed to be my brother's car. And until our mom ran it with the oil light on for about 20 miles and locked the motor up solid. And then dad sold the car for like $75, wasn't it, Steve? Yeah, bad deal. What kind of ring pack will the new engine run? Well, with the old pistons, it was a 1 millimeter, 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter ring pack. With this new setup, I decided to go a 043, 043, 3 millimeter. Going to be running a Dykes second ring. I like running a Dykes second ring for better oil control. It does really good of getting oil off the cylinders. So yeah, that's what's going to be in the new motor. What do I think of stroker cranks for 302s? They're good. The big debate is 331 or 347. And back when I first got into this, the 5.0 scene was really hot. 347s didn't last because of the oil ring issue. But yeah, as far as the crankshaft goes, you wouldn't have any issues with that. Mopar nut, valve springs reached their breaking point, metal stress. Well, something that I learned too with David, picking the right valve spring is pretty complex. A lot of people just focus on seat pressure and open pressure, and that's their guidelines for going about it. But there's another variable into that you need to consider is the frequency resonance resonance frequency. Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. And what that is the rate in which the spring will lose control. You want a spring with a high resonance frequency to keep the valve spring in control on the closing side of the ramp. Because what happens is once the valve spring's in control on the open side because the valve is open. But when the valve starts to close and the coils start to separate, they start fluttering, and it'll get into what's called harmonics or spring surge, and that's a bad thing. It's not necessarily valve float. The valve spring is losing control of the valve train, and its dynamics is all out of whack. But yeah, going back to mixed up balls, I'm really hoping here in the next few weeks we can get this thing going. And I've actually talked to Greg Brown about the dyno, and John, I hadn't got talked to you about this, but we were going to dyno it down in a place called Rock Hill, which is about 45 minutes away from here. And since Greg is closer to, he's down in Georgia, right outside of Atlanta, I thought it would probably be wise if we could go down there and dyno it at his home dyno. That way he's comfortable, because I want him to be there for that process. This is something that he and I dreamed up together, and he's got the dyno headers to fit the heads, and so it just probably be a better transition doing that. Can you talk about Gliptol under the underside of the intake manifold? Let's talk about coatings in general. That's a deep topic. You got to understand the engine has one purpose: turning one kind of energy into another, heat into motion. And when heat escapes, that's just pretty much wasted. You're losing efficiency that way. Um, but as far as putting Gliptol underneath the intake manifold, I'll give you this little story. Right when I first met Vizard, he had bought a 5-liter Mustang. It was like an '89 Fox body car, and he was just uh, disgusted by the factory intake deal, how it goes over to the driver's side intake valve cover there, and it becomes a huge heat sink. And he is big on coatings, and so he said, "I'm going to teach you something." We took the intake off of it. He had it extrude honed, but after that, we coated the manifold in zirconium oxide. It's this bright white surface, and I'm thinking this is different, because that was my first time being exposed to that kind of stuff. And when we first, before we took it apart, we actually went to the drag strip, checked the temperature with the infrared gun before we made a pass and after the pass, just to see how much heat was being transferred into the manifold itself. And it was pretty much ambient temperature of the underside of the hood, 200 degrees. Well, after we put that coating on it, I'm wanting to say that it was around 140 degrees after we did that coating. And I was just blown away that it had that much of a temperature reduction. And there's actually a formula. If you can, um, it's like 20 to 30, I think it's 20 to 30 degrees of reduction in temperature will yield a 2% increase in torque. So something to keep in mind. But Gliptol is something that one of the times I was laid off from Freightliner, going back a little bit, I worked in an electric motor shop, and we always use Gliptol on the windings and armatures and things of that sort. And we had this outside vendor come in trying to sell this different brand for us. And so we decided that we had two 100 horsepower motors that we were rewinding at the time. They were identical. And we actually had a motor dyno there that we would test the motors before we'd send them out. And so we did one in Gliptol, and then we did the one in the other coating. And when we were running them, the first thing that I noticed was there was a huge difference in temperature between both of them. The Gliptol motor was probably 20 degrees cooler, and then that's kind of substantiated what I had thought about it, because I'd already been using it in engines at that point. Um, One of my old books that I'd bought years and years ago. Hang on a second. Even though I'm a Mopar guy, look at this whole thing. I bought this book right here, and this was the first book that I seen where it talked about Gliptol in the valleys of the block. And so, yeah, if you paint the underside of it, it's the same principle. Um, Make sure that it's extremely clean, no grime, grit, dirt, but no oil. For God's sakes, no oil, because you don't want it to separate. Okay, Julius. Julius says here, I have dual quad manifold running on Boss 260, works great. That is awesome. I've always wanted to get my hands on a set of those CarCraft adapters, because I think they're really cool to be able to run. Um, are you talking about the one where you can use the 302 intake onto the 4.6, or are you talking about the 4.6 intake adapter to the 5.4? Rayford. Hey, Andy, I'm wondering what's the cheapest and easiest way to convert a Holly to annular boosters? Well, the thing about changing boosters in a Holly is they're swedged into the main body. You can knock them out. There's a tool that you can buy um, to do that. Um, but there's a company up in New York called Allstate Carburetor, and guy's name is Jim, and he can do just that for you, and he's pretty reasonable. What I did was I disassembled my carburetors, and he can re-dichromate them. I had the 660s that was in the video. They were a match set. They had the same exact build date, and they looked rough when I got them because I got them online from somebody and like a couple $100, but they look like they come out of a swamp. But he recoated them, and when I got them back, they look brand new, and he put annular boosters in it for me. Kurt, thoughts on the 2018 Demon refrigerated intake charge? Thought about a decade. Absolutely, I've thought about that as well, and I think it's pretty ingenious myself. Um, to be able to take something used for one purpose and adapt it to another. And that's really what hot rodding is about, figuring out ways to do things that other people hasn't done. Um, you know, and Mopar guys can relate to this. Back in the day, we didn't have the luxury of having the aftermarket parts like the Chevys or even the Fords had. We had to make do with what we had. And or if you didn't have it, you learn how to make it, or you figure out a way, and that's what makes hot rodding so great. But in this day and time, everybody's so uh, jaded with being able to pick up the phone and call Summit and get whatever they want and just bolt it together. But I think the refrigerated intake thing is pretty awesome. I see what you're saying, Julius. Now, yeah, that is pretty sweet right there. Andrew, the thing about the coatings, it's not about so much Gliptol, is finding a coating that, because you're right, I've seen that video on the aluminum, but what he was doing it for, if I'm not mistaken, was oil, trying to get oil drain back. When you're using it merely as a thermal barrier, that's a little bit different area. Um, give you, for example, you know, being with David, I've got to see Formula One engines. I've got to see pro stock engines, even though they were, a few years old. I'm talking 3 or 4 years behind what the current guys are running. Those guys are so advanced, they actually coat the intake ports to keep the heat from coming into the runner itself. Every single part inside that engine is coated. The valves are coated, the intake runners are coated, exhaust ports are coated, everything is coated, and that's for thermal efficiency. Let's see here. Yeah, John, you're right. It's aftermarket desert, and I remember going and trying to find the Mopar Bible, the thick book about Mopar engines, and that was kind of like the go-to as far as what to do and how to do it back in the day. Um, but yeah, coatings play an important part in engines, and same way with like running coated bearings and coatings on piston skirts. It's all about freeing up the power that's already there. It's actually a coating, and he had. See, we live right here in about 30 minutes west of Charlotte, North Carolina, and Calico Coatings is literally about 30 minutes away from us. And so he had the guys up there at Calico coat the intake for him. So you could probably get a hold of them to, if you wanted to have something done in that zirconium oxide. But so I wanted to talk about the channel a little bit. You know, the channel's growing, and it's because of you guys. You know, your support, and I can't thank you enough for that. This is something that I really enjoy doing, and you know, that's okay, HG. I'm going to probably do that's something else I want to talk about before I get off topic because I can do that very easily. Um, but the channel's doing good, and you know, we will probably do a little bit more live feeds on a more regular basis and have a more structured thing about things that you want to talk about, learn about. You know, I've worked with Chevrolets, I've worked with Fords, Mopars, um, you name it, and I respect them all. And so HG. Oh yeah, by the way, my buddy HG there, Left for Dead Garage, got these stickers right here. You guys need to go over to his channel and subscribe. He's a Chevrolet guy, and he's doing a 64 Impala. It's got a big block in it. He's building it up, and pretty cool stuff. He did a pretty cool video that I thought would be good for the average hot rodder, how to convert a regular alternator to a single wire alternator. So go over there and check him out, man. He's got some good stuff. Um, you're exactly right, Andrew. You know, different metals have different characteristics, and you've got to find what's compatible and what's going to hold up over time. You know, a lot of it can be trial and error, but when you're doing some um, building a high dollar engine, you don't want to just experiment and have it blow up in your face, so to speak. Joseph, will Casper be getting any suspension mods? Yes. One of the things on the menu for the future, once the motor is sorted out, the drivetrain, and it's back running, driving again, is I'm wanting to do a Crown Vic front end underneath it to get it a little bit lower. As far as the rear end goes, um, you know, it's got Caltrack bars on it that work really well. So I'll probably leave that alone. But yeah, I definitely want to put Crown Vic front end underneath it and get rid of the twin I beams because that can be kind of sketchy going down the quarter-mile track with it. Let's see here. Scott Conley, what's up, buddy? Good to see you. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of good stuff coming with the channel. And actually, um, I'm actually assembling mixed up balls at my building at my house because right now David's doing a lot of renovations to his shop, and you know it's real dusty doing construction work, and so I decided to build it at my place, but we will be getting back together for the dyno and all that good stuff. Let's see here. John Wilburn, tell us what transmission is going in Casper. Good question, because it's going to have to be something that will live. You know, we're talking about a truck. The last time I weighed it was 4,080 pounds, and combining out with, you know, 750 horsepower, it's going to have to be something pretty stout. Right now, it has a Ford C4 in it, which I know that will not last. It's already with the old 393. I've already put clutches in it twice because there's just not enough clutch area in a C4 to live with that kind of stress. My buddy Dynamic Racing Transmissions JR, he was telling me, he said, Andy, you got to realize having 600 horsepower in a 4,000 pound truck is almost like having 1,000 horsepower in a 3,000 pound car. Do I know Marty Bowen? No, I do not. Mopar nut C6. Yeah, that's a possibility. The downside to the C6 is while it's super strong, it eats up a ton of power. So I'm kind of torn about using the C6 or biting a bullet and doing a turbo 400 for it. So I've actually contemplated tried putting a 6R80 behind it because my buddy Josh Haynes, he's got 2 of those transmissions and they sell adapter kits, and I know that they're really strong, but I just have to get the controller to program it to run it. So I don't know if that'd be a possibility, but Bowen's Body Shop. Casper's a stout truck. MT, thanks, man. It's been a work in progress. A little bit of backstory about Casper. I originally had a 70 model F100 that I was in a head-on collision with. Got very fortunate. Good Lord was watching over me that I didn't die because that thing, I got hit square in the front end on the frame rail. And so after that truck was demolished, looking for another one, and I went over. Something told me to go over to a house that I used to live in neighboring town, Stanley, and my old neighbor had that 71 there, and I'm thinking, man, that's pretty cool. So I bought it from him, and it originally had a 302 on the column, bone stock 2-barrel, and I started putting speed parts on that 302, made it into a 306. The same route that we all go down. The one thing about hot rods is we're never done working on them. It's always a work in progress. John Wilburn to build you a 727. If I could find a way to get a bell housing on that thing, don't think I wouldn't try it. Of course, I guess I could take an ultra bell and re-drill it for the pump pattern on the 727 and get a different converter with a different snout length. I could probably make that work. But yeah, going back to where we're going with the channel, have a lot of good stuff coming up. My buddy Chris Reese, I did the video back last summer about his 351 Windsor. We're building that alongside of Mixed Up Boss. So I'm actually building a Windsor, and I'm building a my engine, and then I've got a 383 small block Chevy that I'm building going in a T-bucket. So that's going to be pretty cool. It's going to have tunnel ram on it. Going to do the whole tunnel ram setup and all that good stuff. So while everybody's on here, give you a little insight on what's coming on Uncle Tony's channel in a couple weeks. I'm working on another video right now about the nuts and bolts of the dual quad tuning thing, the jetting, the things you need to look into, the things you need to stay away from, and the carburetors themselves. So it's going to be some pretty good stuff coming up. on that. You know, John, one thing that I've always wanted to try is a clutch flight. I know that that sounds crazy, but I've always had a fascination by having a clutch on an automatic transmission. I just think that's pretty cool stuff. And I don't know if anybody out there makes anything that can hold up, because I know they had a lot of durability problems back in the 70s when they made them. But clutch flight's always fascinated me. Yeah, the parasitic loss on a C6 is pretty bad, Mopar Duck. Um, and that when I here's something that I'm wanting to do. Um, I'm big on trying to test different things. Um, when I put the engine back in Casper, I want to leave the C4 in it. I know it's not going to last, and I don't even know if I would try to make passes with it down the track, but I want to be able to have it on there so that I can have my engine dyno figures, put it on the chassis dyno, see what the C4 eats up, because I already know that it eats up a lot because I've already done it with the 393 and the C4 that's in it now. There's a huge difference with a loose converter on a chassis dyno. But I'm wanting to use to get a baseline with the current motor with the C4. So whatever we put in it behind that, I will have something to reference from as far as parasitic loss goes, if that makes sense. Yeah, the B&M Hydro Stick, that was a cool thing. Um, I've actually got to see inside of one of those things. Man, that is pretty crazy stuff because it's not like any other automatic transmission you've ever seen. My uncle had one at one time. John, a 904 and a C4 pretty much have about the same clutch area. They're pretty close in physical side. So I don't know. You could probably get more clutches in a 904 to handle that kind of power. I don't know. Right now, I'm running 6 in the forward and 6 in the direct. Yeah, using 727 parts and C6s. And that's, yeah, you're right about that, Steve. That's pretty good info right there. So, what are the kind of projects you want to see coming up? Has anybody out there got any kind of cool things that they want to see? Yeah, and I'm sure the 904 probably has the same problem as the C4 is the high gear drum, because that 2-3 shifts, that's what clutches wear out in a C4 is in the direct. Um, the forwards will look brand spanking new, but the high gear clutches is what let go because there's just not enough meat on them. Mopar Nut, people always say the 25% rule, this and that. And I've done multiple dyno tests on between convert. For instance, my 4.6 liter Mustang, Mooresville Dragway, absolutely. That's like second home to me there in Shady Side. But in my Mustang, I had the T45 transmission, and I swapped in a C4, and it was like a 75 to 80 horsepower difference in the two. Um, and I actually did that test twice with two different motor combos, and more power it made, more it ate up. Yeah, I'm with you, Julius. For me, simple is better. Because like Uncle Tony and many other gearheads out there, if something breaks on the side of the road, I want to be able to fix it. I don't want to have something that you can't get parts for, and you can't beat simplicity. One thing that I've been thinking about is while I'm a huge fan of tunnel rams and dual quads, the one thing I really want to do, maybe on this engine, is do mechanical fuel injection and find a way to make it work on the street. Because that's pretty much like a race only deal because you got a barrel valve, for idle, and then it dumps all the fuel as it's wide open. There's no real intermediate circuits, but I've been really thinking about it, and I think I can figure out a way to control the fuel pressure to make mechanical fuel injection work on the street. It's going to be something I want to toy with. Joseph, yes, I've got pictures of that on my 393 when we ported the cylinder heads. Those things were flowing 315 CFM at 625 lift. So I decided to bolt my tunnel ram manifold to the head while it was on the flow bench to see what the difference was. It dropped to 240 CFM and I was blown away by that. The old style wine tunnel ram for a 302 was really meant to go on stock heads. It wasn't meant to go on anything that could flow a lot of air because you got to remember it was made in the late 60s, early 70s. And so even after 80 hours of porting on that manifold, we were only able to get it up to around 275 to 280 CFM with the manifold bolted to the head itself. Yeah, the Mercedes mechanical injection, I've messed with that a little bit, and it is kind of where I got my train of thought from, actually. Because there's a couple different kinds. You got to have timed injection or whatever. But I'm thinking that if I make a regulator that is vacuum referenced, you got boost regulators that add more fuel pressure as you add boost. I'm thinking that I could take a regulator and modify it to where when you see decreased vacuum, it will cut down on fuel. Chris Reese, Dale Griffin, my buddies are here. What's going on, y'all? Dale, yeah, I'm gonna have to put a cage in Casper. I mean, something else that you guys may not know is I'm a former NHRA tech inspector, so it wouldn't look good for me going out there running, in the tens and nines in a truck that doesn't even have a cage in it. Now, that's not good ethical behavior on my part. I did NHRA tech work for about 2.5 years. Dale Griffin there, he has a really cool F100 too. He's had some pretty sweet rides. Maybe one day he can get some fat tires underneath Casper for me because it's probably going to need it. That's one thing people are just blown away by with Casper is how well it hooks up for it being on a small tire. I run a 275/60 drag radial, and I've never really had an issue with it hooking up with those cow track bars. You get the pinion angle right, you get the chassis set up, and I swear that it will hook in a mud puddle with those tires. Steve, so we're getting clutch flights evolve into Lincos. I guess you could say that there's maybe some lineage there, because Lincos are planetary transmissions. And in fact, I, I would love to have my hands on a set of Linco for the Casper. I think that would be pretty cool too. Um, but Lincos are pricey, way out of my price range. Deer Slayer, I've always liked the looks of cross ram intakes. Yeah, man, they look great. The problem is with cross ram intakes, from my experience, is unless if it has a removable top, you can't hardly get good fuel distribution in it onto the corner cylinders. Um, if you have one that's got a removable top to it, like the Edelbrocks and some of the other cross rams out there, you can take it apart and actually put in the old popsicle tricks or weld in some little deflector tabs to aid in that. Yeah, I agree, John. A Linco would be pretty awesome in Casper. It'd definitely be different. You know, the one thing about Casper that I've always wanted to maintain is make sure that I never get overstep the line as far as making it a race only truck, because you guys may not understand. I drive that truck everywhere. I mean, I literally pretty much drive it every day if I could, unless it's pouring down rain. Um, but yeah, so I've done that in the past with my Mustang. It was a street car, turned it into a street strip car, then I turned it into a race car, and then I wound up kind of hating it because I did that. Uh, yeah, not good. Yeah, I would accept a link code donation from anybody. So if anybody wants to send me a link code, go right ahead. We'll put it in Casper. Jeffrey, Casper hooks for the same reason it gets 15 miles out. Did your homework. Yeah. Thanks, Jeffrey. And that's the thing. And if you put some thought into your combination and sort out each thing, you will get good results from it. Now, it may not always work the first time, but if you keep working towards your goal, you'll get there. Yeah. And I could not tell you, Mopar Nut, how many people told me I told you so when we set out to drive Casper all the way 10 hours away to go see Uncle Tony. You know, there's like, well, what did you think was going to happen? I'm like, well, what's it for? It's to drive, right? That's what I do. And I had driven that truck on multiple trips hours away from the house before. So it's just one of those things that happen. Think of fun. Hey, we got to start somewhere, right? We might as well start it that way. Chris Reese, what's up, buddy? Yeah, Chris Reese, we've been friends for a long time, and he is actually, I don't know how many people was on here when I was talking about the Unity Motorsports Car Club, but he was an original member of the car club with his old school Mustang. Had a 302 in that car that you wouldn't believe it would run, but man, it was such a good combination. He beat up on so many uh, bigger motor cars. It was unreal. It was funny because you see this plain Jane 302, and he would go out there and beat up on 383s and whatever else. MT Ram, exactly. I have Max Wedge, original cross ram in heads. Yeah, the manifold is the bottleneck, and you know it's a hard thing to overcome. Because of the way it's designed, but there's still no cooler looking intake, bar none. Yeah, John, when you gonna get a new video up, man? I've been waiting. I ain't seen one in a while. Yeah, and we got into a lot of trouble with that old 302 too, didn't we? Well, at least you did. I had my own trouble. You know, um, Steve, thanks, man. Hey, look, John, the Linco fund is already growing, so we might be on to something here. That's an idea that me and Chris Reese has talked about. He actually has a Fox body, and we've been toying around with different ideas as far as maybe, you know, putting different motors down in it to go run it at the track to see what would happen. So that's not out of the realm of possibility. I would love to do something like that. I really think the 318 Fest is going to be really cool, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to make sure that I get off work so that I can go down there for that. Bottle Rocket versus Casper. Well, that was the original plan. We've got to make that happen somehow, some way. I'm going to tell Tony to put the biggest nitrous jets he's got in it, and we're going to have at it. Um, but yeah, going back to the concept of taking like a junkyard engine, I like to take it one, maybe put say a junkyard 351, whatever we do, and maybe put a um, cam and intake and carburetor on it, and just take it to the track and see how much nitrous we can get it to take before it lets go. Yeah, we can do that. Dear Slayer, Casper will eat Bottle Rocket. Well, I can tell you this: when you open that nitrous valve, uh, great things happen, and you can't rule anything out. For instance, when I had my '96 Mustang, I was running like 830s in the eighth mile, put 150 shot on it, and it was going 680s in the eighth mile. So, anything can happen. Well, that would be an epic video for sure if he kicked the rods out of the 318 trying to beat Casper. As long as he stays in his lane, as long as he don't hit the wall. So, getting on the topic of live feeds here, we would probably look at doing one. I'm not going to commit to like weekly because we've got a lot of stuff going on, family, work, and all that. But I definitely want to make this a regular thing, whether it's every bi weekly or something along that line, so that we can have certain topics to talk about. Yeah, ring gap is your friend. And, that's one thing um, most people want to blame, hyper eutectic pistons for breaking. And 90% of the time, it's not the piston's fault for breaking, it's the ring gap's butt and it breaks the ringland off. I mean, that's just what happens. You add that additional heat to it, there's nowhere for it to go. Makes for a bad day because I've been there and done that. See, it wouldn't be fair to tell y'all about all of my success stories if I don't tell you about my failures too. That's false advertising. Trying to put a direct port nitro system on a stock 4.6 liter two valve, I learned all of the weaknesses. How do I feel about total seal gapless rings? Um, I've actually used them in a few different builds. I will only use them in NA builds though. I do not like putting them under boost or any kind of nitrous because it's not a true gapless ring. You know, they overlap each other. And I've always had a worry about it breaking off there where it gets thin. So yeah, I mean the rings that are going in mixed up bosses made by Total Seal, they're just not the Total Seal type. You're exactly right, Steve. You have to fail to succeed. If anybody tells you that they're, you know, you're in the drag racing and you're an overnight success, no, it doesn't happen that way. If you want to win $1 million in drag racing, start out with 5 million. Okay, that's how it works. 250 horsepower plates under each car. Yeah, that's pretty cool right there. John Wilburn failing spectacular along the way makes winter all this winter. You got that right. You know, when you have an epic fail and it's out there for everybody to see, and when you come back and rise up out of the ashes, it makes it all worth it. Um, you know, and that's the thing about hot rodding. You know, it's a live and learn type deal. It's not something that just happens overnight. And you know, if I can try to give you some of my personal experience to keep you from having headaches, that's what this is about. You know, because trust me, I've made my share of mistakes and you learn from those things, or at least you hope you do. You got that right. It's satisfaction. You know, going to the racetrack for me is, I remember going the very first time that I went, I was in my natural habitat. If that makes sense to you guys, you know, I was with my people there and I had never seen anything like it. And to this day, and it's been 25, 30 years, I don't know how long it's been now, probably, yeah, it's over 30 years, that I still get that same feeling when I go to the track today. No, you can't kill the 454 before I get to hear it run, HD. It don't work that way. Dang. Yeah, I would love to be able to drive Casper to 318 Fest as long as I can get this junk together. Um, One of the biggest hiccups that I see in the program is having to have headers built. Um, Going to have at least a 2-inch primary tube for this motor combo. What's going on now? And it's you know, I'm gonna have to decide to go the fender well header because I don't really think it's going to fit in the frame and get the bends that I want without killing a ton of power. So unfortunately, y'all, in about 5 minutes, I'm gonna have to cut this off. But drag boss, there he is. Yeah, you definitely need to do this, Tim. Everybody, if you're into Fords and specifically Cleveland, you've got to go over to Drag Boss's channel. Tim has some really cool things going on. I mean, just a wealth of knowledge and what he's putting out there. He's doing a vintage pro stock engine build, and he's been talking to Billy Glidden, getting some background on Bob Glidden's engine program. And man, I'm telling you, it's dynamite stuff. So you need to check his channel out. Go over there and subscribe to him. Just put up a video on machinism. Yeah, that's pretty cool stuff right there. Need to go over to BC Block O2. Drag bras, Tim, that's what it's all about. I believe in the philosophy that rising tides raises all boats. And, it's not about competition on these YouTube channels, because I do believe that we all bring something um, to the table that's unique. Our personalities, our experiences, and the things that we've done. And I think that's what makes this whole YouTube thing so cool. Oh, before I go, I got to tell you this story. My brother Steve Wood just posted it. He had a geostorm years and years ago, and I didn't even know how to drive a straight drive. I think I was like 13, maybe something like that. I was young, and we were at the track, and I begged him to let me race his Geo, and it was a straight drive car. And he was like, "You're crazy, dude. I'm not letting you take my car down the track." Well, finally, I bugged him enough where he held out his keys, and I snatched them up and went and got in line and entered the foot brake race and made it to the semifinals and beat a Grand National, stalling out in reverse. And I still took the win light because he broke half track. Thanks, Dale. I appreciate you being here for the support, man. But yeah, Tim's channel, Drag Balls, the vintage pro stock thing. I know that the Southeastern Gassers Association has a really good thing going, but for me personally, I love that stuff, but I'm more into like the 69, 70, 71, 72 era of pro stock. That's like my sweet spot. And in the mid 70s, because there was a lot of technological advances in engine design that came from pro stock that you still see today that's relevant. The amount of power that they were making back then was pretty phenomenal for what they had to work with. Back then they were working with stock casting heads, modifying them, and putting exhaust high port plates on them, doing whatever they could to get an edge over the competition. So to me, that's what drag racing is about, and the whole hot rodding thing in general. Yeah, you're exactly right, Julius. It's a close knit group that we see each other's name on about everybody's channel. Yeah, for me, the pre DRC pro stock era, the in '82 things changed big time when they went to the 500 cubic inch limit in all of the pro categories. It changed it, and they've never gotten away from it. And you think about it today, they've still stuck with that rule. My idea of pro stock today should really be what is factory stock. I love watching the factory stock cars. It's cars that people can relate to. They run in engines that you can go out on a dealer showroom floor and buy. The pro stock of today has no relevance to the people uh, out in the real world, in my opinion. You're right. When you're trying to race somebody in a 20-second car and you're having to sit there and wait, it feels like an eternity waiting on that tree to come down, and you will red light like crazy waiting. Well, I'm going to have to go, y'all. This has been an awesome experience. Wait a minute. Let's see here. See. Yeah, the W2 headed engine. Now, think about this. When you're talking about Bob, I promise I'll shut up after this. But when you're talking about Bob Glidden in 1978, he was a force to be reckoned with the Fairmont. And then in 1979, he switches from Ford to Mopar, and he goes out and wins the championship. I mean, come on, with a completely different engine program. That's what makes Bob Glidden so great, in my opinion. The fact that he changed mid-course and went to Mopar and did the same thing he was doing in the Ford. So it goes to show you that the principles that he was applying to that Ford, I'm sure he applied to the Mopar, and guess what? It worked. You know, engines are engines regardless of the name on them at the end of the day. I had a blast too, y'all, and we will definitely get together and do this again coming up. And yeah, so once again, till next time, this is Andy. I'll catch y'all later. Good night, y'all.